good morning. I'm Patricia Murphy. It's Tuesday. This is Seattle Now. Going nude at Seattle's Denny Blaine Park could be a thing of the past. Neighbors have sued, claiming illegal activities are going on there. And the nudity question is back in court this week. In a minute, we'll get the latest from KUOW reporter Noelle Gasca. But first, let's get you caught up. It's primary election day, your last chance to get your ballot postmarked or into an official ballot drop box. At last check, voter turnout was hovering around 10%. Maybe grab that ballot from the bottom of your mail pile and do your civic duty. Look for the first results after tonight's 8 p.m. deadline. We'll keep you up to date in headlines. If you couldn't tell by the cloud cover, the weather is turning. The National Weather Service is predicting rain tonight and lows around 62. Rain again tomorrow into the night, maybe even a thunderstorm. Same goes for Thursday. Clouds should move out of here by Friday. Look for daytime highs in the 70s. And Washington companies laid off more than 1,000 workers last month. Today, the Employment Security Department will host an information session to help workers file for unemployment benefits. They can't address specific cases, but they can help you get the ball rolling. The session starts at 1. Check back for more headlines on tonight's episode of Seattle Now. For decades, Denny Blaine Park on Lake Washington has been a nude beach and a gathering space for Seattle's LGBTQ community. After a recent lawsuit by a neighborhood group, the future of nudity at Denny Blaine is up in the air. A new plan from the city would split the park into two sections, clothing optional and clothing required. It's part of a legal case which will continue in a King County courtroom tomorrow. KUOW's Noelle Gasca is here now to catch us up on what's going on. Noelle, glad you're here. Thanks for taking the time.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Before we get into this plan of splitting up the park, how did we get here? What did park neighbors say was happening at Denny Blaine?
So residents of Denny Blaine and members of this neighborhood association, Denny Blaine Park for All, they allege that over the last decade, there's been a significant uptick of illegal illicit activities at the park that make it unsafe for residents and Seattleites broadly to use the park. Things like illicit drug use, public masturbation, public sex, and that makes it hard for residents and for people to come and bring their family members to the park or just go themselves. I spoke to Lee Keller. She's a spokesperson for Denny Blaine for All, and she told me that the crux of the issue isn't necessarily the public nudity. It's the surrounding kind of issues tied to the public nudity that have residents concerned and deciding to take action against the city.
The neighborhood group, Denny Blaine Park for All, has sued. Let's talk about that lawsuit.
Yeah, so neighbors feel like the city has not adequately responded to these allegations. They haven't acted enough to clean up the park and respond to the things that they've alleged, so they've sued the city. A couple weeks ago, King County Superior Court Judge Samuel Chung issued this preliminary injunction. The association was asking Judge Chung to close the park entirely. He denied that request, and instead, he ordered the city to come up with an abatement plan. He said, you have 2 weeks to figure out how you're going to crack down on public nudity at Denny Blaine, because in its current status, it's a public nuisance, even though we know in the city of Seattle, public nudity is not necessarily illegal.
Right. It is legal to be nude in the city, but in this case, like you said, the judge has said it could be a public nuisance, which brings us to today. The solution the city came up with to satisfy the court involves dividing the park. What does that look like?
Yeah, so the city's proposal, they want to put the park into two chunks. The first is this clothing required section, and that's the section that faces the street that you can see when you're walking by the park. If you're driving by, that's where you would be required to wear clothing. And then the second tier is a clothing optional section where if you want to sunbathe nude, you are welcome to. And that's the section of the park that's down the stairs. It's a little bit more private. It's up against the shore. They also want to put up signage letting people know the rules of the park and the city and state laws. They want to have park rangers present And then they also want to create this visual barrier, which would split the clothing required section and the clothing optional zones up. So you wouldn't necessarily be able to see the clothing optional zone from standing in that clothing required section.
A literal barrier between the nude portion of the beach and the portion of the beach that requires clothing.
Right.
All right. Noelle, how did the neighborhood group Denny Blaine Park for All respond to this plan?
Yeah, so I reached out to Lee Keller, who's the spokesperson for Denny Blaine for All. She shared a statement with me on behalf of the association, and it said that the city's abatement plan, quote, ignores the history, violence, threats, and escalating illegal behavior at Denny Blaine, and that proposals like the park ranger patrols and the visual barriers that the city is proposing are, quote, recycled, failed ideas.
As we mentioned at the top, Denny Blaine is a long-time gathering space for Seattle's LGBTQ community. What have you heard from park goers about the city potentially banning nudity there?
Yeah, so I went to the park the day after Judge Chung ruled that the city needed to submit that abatement plan. And some of the people that I spoke to at the park were really outraged by that injunction and said that the park is one of the few places in this city where queer people feel safe to show up in their body and feel embraced and also feel safe. Here's Eric Rios. I asked him about the allegations of illegal activity at Denny Blaine. Here's what he had to say.
I think it's definitely overblown. I think it's definitely super homophobic too. The most I've seen queers do here is like talk about like their academic dissertations, and like they're just gossiping, they're just eating, they're just sunbathing, they're not doing all that like stuff that a lot of people are implying, you know.
I also talked with Derek Dizon. He's Eric's partner, and here are his thoughts.
All people want to be comfortable in their bodies. All people want to feel like sun on their bodies and have it be a good feeling. All people want to be next to a cool body of water and enjoy the community of other people. And so that's really all what we're doing here. It's really not that big of a deal at the end of the day.
Eric and Derek both mentioned that they personally haven't witnessed any public masturbation or drug use at the park. And generally, they feel really safe when they're at Denny Blaine. But the times when they have felt unsafe, it's coming from people outside of the park who are curious about what's going on at Denny Blaine. It's people coming by on boats and shouting homophobic slurs. It's also people who are coming to the beach and filming people without their consent. There's this fascination with what's happening at Denny Blaine, and it can at times cross over into this voyeuristic zone.
And there have been, aside from the lawsuit, other attempts by neighbors to change the dynamic at Denny Blaine. A few years ago, a homeowner who lives next to the park offered to build a playground, ostensibly as a way to rid the park of nudity.
Right. So back in 2023, the Parks Department came forward, and at the time they said, we have an anonymous donor. We didn't quite know yet who that donor was. They came forward and they said, hey, this person is willing to pay millions of dollars to fund the construction of a children's playground at Denny Blaine. And that raised some questions at the time because, A, the neighborhood, while it's very affluent, it's also an area where there aren't schools. And it's not necessarily a family neighborhood. It's kind of old school Seattle. So people kind of question the need, the urgency of the need for this playground. And a lot of people also felt like, you know, this is a way for someone to push Seattle's LGBTQ community out of this park as well.
To some people, it felt a little on the nose in terms of its intent.
Right. So there was a lot of public pushback. Our colleague here at KUOW, Ashley Haruko, did some investigative work and found out that the anonymous donor is a resident of Denny Blaine called Stuart Sloan. He's a wealthy land developer here in the city. Found out that he was in communication with Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell's office and kind of trying to push this plan forward. Ultimately, the plan to build that playground did not pan out. And so this lawsuit has kind of become the next chapter in trying to end public nudity and address these allegations of illicit behavior at Denny Blaine.
Okay, well, it is in a King County courtroom now. What happens next, Noelle?
Yeah, so there's a hearing scheduled for tomorrow in the city's motion to reconsider Judge Samuel Chung's ruling. What I'm going to be listening for is the role the abatement plan is going to have in Judge Chung's decision. Judge Chung could either dismiss the motion and say, no, public nudity has to end in its entirety at Denny Blaine, or he could possibly reference the abatement plan and say, the city has laid out some viable options to address public safety concerns. The city, you don't have to flat out end public nudity at the park, but you also need to enforce these policies.
And we will continue to follow the developments of this story and bring them to you on Seattle Now. KUOW reporter Noelle Gasca, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to Seattle Now. Today's episode was produced by Andy Hurst. It was edited by Caroline Chamberlain Gomez. Our production team also includes Vaughn Jones, Brooklyn Jamerson Flowers, and Paige Browning. Greg Kramer does our theme music. Seattle Now and KUOW Public Radio are members of the NPR network. I'm Patricia Murphy. See you soon.